Our next speaker is Ben Ilfeld, and some of you may not know the media industry struggles a little bit with revenue these days, monetization. I know, shocking, but it's true. So Ben is the lead audience and revenue strategist at 10up, and he thinks about monetization and content conversion and ad operations and everything like that. So he's talking about destructive ad tech and practical solutions. Please join me in welcoming Ben.
Thank you for the introduction. Can everybody hear me in the back? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me just fine. Okay, awesome. And it's okay, you know, I had the lunch too. It was really good. It's okay to nap, just relax. It's a beautiful, quiet thing. So really quickly, I just want to introduce myself and 10up. If you don't know 10up, it is an agency. We work on complicated web development projects, usually centered around WordPress, always open source at the core. These are some of our clients, and these are clients that I've worked with as a lead audience and revenue strategist. What is audience and revenue strategy? Yeah, you know, we came up with a new term. I hope it's not too jargony. Basically, we work with content creators, publishers, other people to optimize their strategies around monetization, as was just stated. At 10up, we work in these multidisciplinary teams. So I work directly with engineers, project managers, the whole delivery team to make sure everything that we think of in strategy actually is implemented with the client. And some of the tactical work, if you work in the industry, we handle things that are sort of practical, ad code, making sure that that's performant and it isn't ruining the user experience, handling demand source competition sometimes to make our publishers a little bit more money, and sometimes some really big ideas, like a couple that I'll share today. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about, we all know the problem. If you've read, especially if you work in the industry, but if you've just casually read online news sites, ads are an experience problem, and there's some deeper issues with that as well. I'm going to talk about who's responsible without pointing too many fingers, and I think it's good for us to all take some share of the responsibility. And then I really want to talk about a framework of how we can think about solutions that are actually practical and pragmatic and will change things. And then I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is a really kind of new technology. One is an old technology I think is poised for a nice comeback. So we know, just by using it, that a lot of news sites overburden us with ads. The page load times seem long. It's really damaging to the publisher as well. So some of the current failures, as I mentioned, page load times are alarmingly high, interrupted ads ruin the experience. Now advertising, actually, I was having a conversation with somebody last night, and another one this morning. Really, the security concerns around advertising these days are very significant. It's the #1 vector for getting something malicious onto your computer, so that is scary. And there's this sort of theory inside the ad tech world that if we all just had really good targeting, everyone would like the web better because ads would be so tailor-made for you. But not just the practical experience of that not happening. If you ask people and survey them time and time again, they say they really don't want to trade their privacy for better targeted ads. So just to give you an example of one of these problems, probably the biggest one, that's the news industry on average, and this is everything else on the internet, right? So that's not a good situation. Now, these types of things, they have really important real-world effects. One of them is lower engagement. So people might show up on your website because you had the right information, so the Google search pointed them there, or a friend shared the article. But when they open it up on their phone, if it takes too long to load, they simply hit the back button, and they're right back to Facebook. And so I think it's important, if we care about our relationship with our readers and having them actually read the content we're creating or watch the video we made, we have to think about performance on a page. And when you dive into performance, you will find that one of the worst kind of performance, how to say this, the worst things on the internet are these terrible third and fourth party scripts that are forever running in the background, sometimes preventing you from getting to the content, always chewing through your data plan. The smaller audience. So many people don't recognize that we are trading off slightly better monetization for the audience that we do have for an overall smaller audience when we use things like interruptive ads. And it will affect page rank. It's getting to the point where Google is going to have their own version of a sort of ad blocker inside Chrome. And so we are actually shrinking our total audience, and that's kind of scary for mass media. And I actually think this is important. Trust in media hit an all-time low last year. And I don't think it's just historical. I don't think it's just political. I actually think it's the way we're treating our users is foundational. So it's important to think about these things when we think about monetization. And finally, we could see the practical effect. This is the growth of ad blockers. It is exponential. This is happening rather rapidly. So it's easy to just say, well, it's ad tech's fault, whatever ad tech is. A group of marketing technology firms that put really bad scripts on our page. They make terrible stuff, and if we could just get rid of them and somehow they will be out of business or something, everything will change. And that's fine. But I actually think in this room, we've got publishers, strategists, engineers. I think we're all sort of responsible. It helps to pay my paycheck indirectly, and probably a lot of yours. So is there a practical solution you could just jump to today that wipes out all of the ad tech that fills up, you know, the ads that you have on your site that might pay your salary? There really isn't for a scaled publisher. You know, for a group like Digital First, it's not really practical to abandon the ad model whole cloth. So if we're sort of responsible, but we can't just turn it off, what do we do? So one thing we do is we should be collaborating with some larger institutions. If you're on the scale of VFN, you should be talking to Google. You should be part of IAB. There's a lot of acronyms trying to fight this right now, so that's fine, that's good at the industry level. A lot of times, though, that kind of leaves us in the lurch for our personal agency or what we do day to day. And I think individual publishers should be aggressively experimenting, trying out new models. But to do that, we have to do it responsibly. So I believe that we should be improving user experience, not just monetizing more heavily. We should be creating more revenue opportunities. So I don't want to take away from the current revenue and potentially trade it off for something. I want to add some new line of business that could make us more money. And maybe in 5 or 10 years can be a main line of business. But that is a really great way to get people in your organization that would normally be an opponent of this kind of innovation to be on board. You have to create real value. And I think this is something that people forget a lot of times. We're working with brands and firms. They want something in return, right? They want better brand awareness, maybe a direct response campaign. They want to see that what you're doing is actually valuable to them and be able to measure it. And so that means that you can't just whole cloth easily abandon things like an ad manager, like DoubleClick for Publishers as your ad manager. It's important to be able to pull reports for your clients and have those reports be industry standard and sit alongside all their other reports about whether the ad was effective or not. And finally, we should be leveraging existing technologies. And this is extremely important to control costs. If we're experimenting, then we should be as lean as we possibly can be. We should be using the tools that are already available to us if possible. So, I'm going to give you an example. Madison Square Garden Networks. Obviously, Madison Square Garden, place where they play a lot of basketball, some hockey. They also have deals with TV deals with like Buffalo Sabres and the Red Bulls soccer team. So this is a group that's really heavy on video and sports. And what we wanted to do with them is, from a design standpoint, try to create opportunities for their partner brands to sponsor content that lived not only, say, in the garden itself and then on linear TV, but now on the web, and feel really native, feel like they're true partners. And I should be clear here, when I'm talking about sponsoring content, I'm not talking about advertorials. So there is a whole different piece, which is how do we best use native style ads in that way, but we'll get to that in a second. So think about content sponsorship as little logos, sometimes big logos, that we actually apply right next to editorial content. So I'll show you an example of this in a second. You can leverage the taxonomies you have. You can leverage WordPress, and we'll talk about that. to actually make building those pieces in as easy for editors and ad ops as possible. And then, as I said before, if you do it right, the reporting and management of the ad should happen in an ad manager. It's easy because content management can do so much. You think, we'll just use content management for ad management. But if you talk to the people in your sales or ad ops, there's reasons why you would not. So let me show you what this looks like for the reader when you have a nice content sponsorship. So here's an example of a post. It has a relatively large logo for Chase right there. If this is editorial content, they would have written no matter what. They did not write this for Chase. Just a little bit bigger, show you how large that is when you're actually looking at it. When that post is promoted on a front page or a splash page, it looks like this. Here's that post, and then right there, you've still got a little Chase logo. That's an ad impression, everybody. That's okay. That's good. And we'll just zoom in a little tighter on that. Yes, absolutely. So the question was, how do you distinguish between sponsored content needing advertorials and content which is sponsored, which is I'm kind of showing you here. And my argument is that you probably don't have them live on the same site. So for Madison Square Garden, they don't do advertorials. What they do is they use this system instead of doing advertorials. If you have a site that does advertorials, the key is going to be the design treatment and the copy. So if you wanted it to really distinguish between things that are sponsored content, meaning they're advertorial, it should probably say advertorial to be super clear. And something like this might say supported by. And that gives a very kind of squishy distinction, but it gives a visual distinction to the reader. So that's the quick answer. Yeah, it's fine. I'll do one more question. I'll keep moving. Yep. Sure. Yeah, and I totally understand. So the question really, or the statement was, it can make you weary, especially in certain categories. So if you're talking about sort of quote-unquote hard news, to see that, say, the New York Times reporting on Charlottesville is sponsored by Pepsi might make you really concerned. So let's remember that it's all about context. So you have to be the right kind of publisher to give some of these experiments a shot, and these are examples. So my hope is that the idea of leveraging existing technologies to experiment will lead someone like the New York Times to think of new ways to monetize their content that's closer to what their partners want and need without the cruft of the privacy intrusions, the malware, the programmatic advertising, the long page load time. So I just want to be clear, this is not a solution for everybody, and I cannot turn it on for all of you tomorrow. It's not that kind of thing. This is an example of the kind of innovation we think is necessary for the industry to find better models for advertising. So hope that makes sense. Just another quick example of this. Here's that same type of logo, but now it's not on a nice, beautiful image. It's on a white background, so now it's a little color logo. So we have versions of the logo for color and white versions when they're in relief. So it's pretty cool. I'll show you how it works, but I think it's very classy. It may not feel as ethical, but I think it's very classy. So here's what it looks like to the editor. If you're an editor and you're working there day to day, you're not really thinking about managing sponsorships. You're not thinking about ads. If you have a post that's part of a sponsored series by, say, Chase, it's very easy in WordPress to just have this little piece here, and it's just a taxonomy that you can assign and say, hey, that's Chase. And there's a nice tag cloud below it that shows the most often used sponsors. That way it's unlikely that you misspell Chase. Actually, I want to move on. I should have said one other thing that's kind of cool. So for MSG, some of the other ways they target are really important. Chase might own, for example, the post game at a Knicks game. So you go to the Knicks game, and the minute that the horn sounds, they have Chase ads everywhere, and on TV, they might have a program where they recap what happened during the game, and then they've got Chase logos there as well. And so here we can take post-game content or even scoreboards that now went to post-game and use WordPress taxonomies to say, this is now post-game, make sure to have the Chase logo on it, rather than the Mercedes logo that was sponsoring the game. And so this opens up new opportunities. Instead of selling a particular game once, you can sell it 3 times, pre-game, in-game, and post-game. So that kind of granularity, that's very different targeting than the kind of targeting that cookies the user, follows them around the internet, and then tries to make sure that you show just the right thing, just the right person, just the right time. This is more traditional sponsorship. And then publishers benefit from the split because they have more that they can sell, more partnerships they can sell. And for ad ops teams, this is really important. A lot of times people think that I do ad ops, and I do some. But most of the time, I try to set ad ops teams up for success. Those are usually internal teams. So for an ad ops team, what we did is we made a really simple form within DoubleClick for Publishers, which is their professional tool. So all they have to do is say, give it a name, give a click-through URL, upload the logo. That's basically it. The other things are optional. So it's really easy to create the creative, and then it's really easy to manage the creative. So I was just talking about targeting. We take those taxonomies from WordPress, and we send them to DFP as what are called key values. And so you simply choose background is light, and sponsor is Chase, and sponsor is true, because we can simply say, don't put this on any sponsored content, put this on all sponsored content. And that will actually be all the targeting that's necessary to have that, that light background color Chase logo show up everywhere. The other cool thing about this is that actually, I'll just quickly say, for those of you who are not used to DFP and what you can do, you can apply labels and things like that so that you have groups of orders, exclusions of where ads shouldn't show on particular types of content or against other ads, and the reporting all stays the same. So when you go to pull Chase's reporting, you don't have to go to a separate system. You can just say, show me what they're doing with their display ads, show me what they're doing with their video ads, show me what they're doing with these sponsored content ads. And it all comes out in the same report. The other thing that's kind of geeky, and I'm excited to dive into it, is this fluid size native style. So native style is a new type of advertisement that Google and DFP pushed out last year in anticipation of fighting the likes of Taboola and Outbrain. And I won't go into why and all the little details, but I will say that it gives you the ability to create these really simple templates. And one of the neat things about it is that our engineers can go in, or your engineers can go in, they can set up the ad once inside DFP with the right HTML and CSS, and then you get that little form so that somebody in ad ops can simply do their job as they normally would with a traditional display ad. The other thing that's really important is the fluid size. So a fluid size ad inside DFP, what it does is it takes whatever that image is and it fills whatever the container div is. So our front-end engineers can say, build truly responsive ads. So if you went from a large browser to a small screen, even if you were dragging your browser to make it smaller, as the div itself becomes smaller, the ad that's within the div also scales appropriately. So it looks really good at any size, and you don't have to upload 10 versions of a logo. Just one will do it. So just to show you a little behind the curtain in DFP, this is what it looks like when an engineer might take their code and create some of these templates. You've got some HTML, you've got your CSS, there's some macros you can use down here that are common within the ad industry. So again, we're using professional industry level tools, and that's really important because professionals are going to be using these tools every day. I want to give you a second example, something totally different. That all relies on, yes, interesting stuff, kind of new. This I like, it's interesting in a way because it's old. So we were working with My Jewish Learning, and they have a lot of affiliate links on the site. They make money when you buy like Shabbat candles. And managing all those affiliate links inside the CMS just as links can be really hard. So for example, what if the Etsy shop that sold those candles went out of business last year, but you still have that link? It's not a great user experience and you don't make money. So let's recognize that affiliate links are content, first of all. Second thing is, let's leverage custom post types to manage these affiliate links in WordPress, because they're this special kind of content. And let's use this to remove a lot of the manual work. So it's easier for your editors and writers. Let's make changing the links easy. That was the example from before. And of course, it's really cool technology, so we can connect to the retailer and suck in some of the metadata so that we can actually give a better presentation. I'll show you what that looks like. So here's an example of what it might look like for the reader. These are affiliate links, right? I mean, they're ads, but they're content. It's kind of cool. It's simple. They're just links, right? Easy. Now, here's what else it can look like. So you could take that same affiliate link and make it look more like a call to action. Let the reader know that they're about to go to Amazon. Make sure they know it's cheap. Give them a product description, but how about a picture? Right? So affiliate links can be better. And here's what it looks like for the editor. So inside WordPress, we've got a very familiar interface. These are just a custom post type. And really quickly, you've got product categories, and you've got connections. Product categories are going to show you, what this might be, again, like Shabbat candle or something like that. You can see it's not filled out for this one, but something easy to create for the future. And connections shows you all of the posts where this is actually promoted. So you can jump in and see how it looks. The other thing that the editor now has is an option like this is a short code UI. It used to be shortcake, I guess. This nice little option to just click in. Hey, I want to add an affiliate link. I'll just click Add Affiliate Link. And it just drops in the right shortcode. I want to mention a couple of cool things that we did that aren't necessarily live. If you go to My Jewish Learning, you won't see all these things yet. But one of the things is a script to migrate all existing links. So they already have a ton of links. Isn't that a mess? Did we fix their problem? Not until our script goes through, identifies all their links, which it has, and then you could press a button to make them all part of this custom post type system. And the second part is a connection with Amazon's API, which actually, I guess we did build that and it's live. And what it does is it brings in those product images and some of the metadata. So it'll help us fill out those categories instead of manually, do it automatically. So just saving time. Once you've got that right information architecture, a lot of opportunities open up to you. So I think it's pretty amazing. I do. I mean, it's a very old thing. But if you're talking about providing obvious value, someone's clicking the link and buying the product, that's great direct response. And I should say, again, right, this isn't going to work for everybody. You're not going to put a product link for, certain stories. You're covering like a plane crash. You're not putting in affiliate links for Southwest. It's not appropriate. So, yeah, I mean, it's for a part of your content or for publishers who this makes sense for. But again, it's using existing technologies like, hey, we have WordPress, we have custom post types. Let's put these things together to make editors' jobs easier, make more money, experiment outside of the normal bounds of ad tech. And for future opportunities, just imagine using Elasticpress to do automated curation of these so that editors don't even have to touch it or decide to put a short code in their story. They just have the appropriate content applied to the right affiliate link. So the opportunities are really quite endless. As I said before, these are just a couple of examples. So what I'm really hoping for is innovation, and I want to convince everybody in this room that publishers have agency here. They can, they should. I'm not responsible for part of the problem. They should be part of the solution. So I hope that gets everybody charged up. I will say, last night and this morning when I was talking to people, I realized everybody wanted me to pick up the anarchist flag and say kill it all, which would be great. And if I had a great alternative we could all switch to and still be employed, I'd absolutely do it. I am hoping that this charges everybody up to keep their jobs and make a positive difference. So, thank you guys.
Ben. We have some time for questions. Please do wait for me to bring the mic to you so we can get your question on the video, and we'll go from there. So, questions?
So the innovation examples you described, they all bypass the traditional ad tech auction programmatic buying, right?
Yes.
Do they use any of their technologies?
Both of them do in different ways. So with the first example, you're still using DoubleClick for Publishers, which is an ad management tool that was expressly designed to handle both direct sold and programmatic. So it's worth noting that you're not having to change your tool. It isn't using a lot of the technologies that can create the negative user experiences that we're talking about. We're using the best parts of the tool to create positive user experiences in that case. That said, programmatic technologies are extremely important. They're not going away, and they're a way for advertisers to buy at scale and for publishers to sell at scale. The question in my mind is, how do they operate? What are the other tools that ride along with the creative? What are the tools that enable it that enhance or hurt the user experience? So these are the questions I think we have to answer. They're sometimes a little bit more complex and nuanced than just throwing everything out, because it won't satisfy either brands or publishers at scale.
Any thoughts on sponsored video content that maintains the user?
It sounds great. So the question is sponsored video content, and I'm all for what you can sell. And if you can direct sell sponsored video content, then you're on a great path. If you're using programmatic backfill for video, unfortunately a lot of the technologies are immature. So then you have to go technology by technology to determine whether it makes sense for your site. But simply making a deal with a Teads or a Tout isn't necessarily going to give you a great user experience. It does take some thought, take some careful engineering to make sure that those work on your site.
Hi. What I like a lot about the examples that you showed is that it actually provides a really good experience for the user as well. My question is twofold. One, I mean, it looked like a lot of the things, because you set it up on an article level, requires a lot of manual setup. What will be like the workflow, and how do you determine who sponsors what kind of thing?
Yeah, for the sponsorship piece, so there are parts of it that are automated. For example, if we're talking about post-game content for a particular team, those are usually set by default. As the editor's writing it, they may change it, but they sort of know what kind of article they're writing, and that's all they need to set for the sponsorship to come through. And I was also showing there is a manual option to add that in that makes it a little bit easier to do that kind of, hey, I've got this one store, I want to make sure that the logo pops up on it. But most of it does have to be automated for publishers to really use it across their org.
Is there a trend towards individually sold content? I read an article recently about how publishers are experimenting with producing less ads on sites and then, of course, charging more for them and getting closer to the advertiser.
That sounds great. If there's a trend line, it goes the opposite direction, which is hard for everybody. Like, I feel like there's an article that's hopeful in like every 6 months. I read something about how it's going to change. I remember a couple years ago when I first came to 10up, I identified trends for 2015 or whatever it was. And one of the trends I loved was what's called programmatic guaranteed, where you'd have a relationship between an advertiser brand and a publisher that was as easy as setting up other programmatic relationships on large ad networks and allowed the brand to target and do all the things they normally do, but in a way that was a little bit more prescribed. So the price might be prescribed, the creative might have to be approved, things like that. And I just haven't seen it take off. I'm not saying it can't, and I don't want it to stop. I want people to keep pushing on that end, but there's a lot of complexity there in order to make it a simple relationship between the publisher and the brand at scale. So I don't think it's wishful thinking. I think it's something that a lot of VC money has gone behind and should happen. But because it's not there at this moment, I can't say that the trend line's in that direction.
Hi, Ben Alistair from Biblio. So with programmatic trading, which was mainly based around audiences, do you feel that there's a renaissance now back into contextual advertising? So advertising that matches the content of the page. Google have recently announced a new native style that they're releasing.
Yes, to make it simple. And part of that is because there are two counter trends that are actually gaining momentum from marketers. The first is any of this targeting working at all? It's a reasonable question to ask, and we have enough data now to know that relatively untargeted mass media campaigns are actually performing as well as these targeted campaigns where you spend a lot of money on the ad tech. And there are some marketing professors out there who believe very strongly that fundamentally, if you're working for brand awareness, you shouldn't be so hyper laser focused on a subset of the audience you think might be your client. You should assume that many people are potentially your clients, even if they use other solutions. And one of the big brands that's bought into that is Procter & Gamble, sort of throwing out a lot of that. The other thing that plays well is that we're entering an age where just a small amount of data, so what you might be reading right now, that contextual advertising, may be enough to infer that someone is in the audience you want. And that's really the change. It's not that they're not wanting that audience. It's that brands don't need to track you everywhere. If they just know one or two things about you, their data models already show them everything they need to know. So that might be scarier, but that's also true.
Would these affiliate links be sold based on like number of impressions, number of clicks, and the same with the sponsored content, the article sponsorships?
Those are good questions. So most affiliate links work on conversion. So basically, the link that you click has some attributes that the retailer can track all the way through purchase. And so you're getting money when someone actually buys the object or the service. So that's pretty cool because that value relationship is there, and you don't need to establish it, you don't need to negotiate it, you just need to sign up for Amazon's program or Etsy's program and start promoting links and make money. The other question was, how does it work with sponsored content? So the other example I gave was Madison Square Garden. They have these great existing corporate partners, and they want to extend those partnerships. I don't think it's easy to sell those, and even then, the logos that you saw here aren't even the center of that partnership. They're just an extension of existing partnerships in many cases. So I think it's important to note we've got different publishers on different ends of the spectrum in terms of how deep your relationships are and your business development goes. In terms of the pricing model for those, if you want to do partnerships right, and this is more opinion from me, I'm not saying how Madison Square Garden does it, that's up to them. But if you want to do it right, in my opinion, you should not sell partnerships around things like total volume of ad impressions or clicks. It should be about, a partnership should be about knowing what your client's needs are and fulfilling those needs. If their needs are brand awareness, you should be working with their agency to measure the brand awareness of the campaign that you're working on and use that as the metric and benchmark. So that would be the kind of thing you do with those sponsored logos.
Have you looked at all into video product placement on the site? And what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, video product placement is fantastic as well. It's really almost an affiliate link, native type thing. I think the question is, for a lot of publishers, Madison Square Garden doesn't have this problem, but most publishers, well, even, I'll be honest, even Madison Square Garden has this as a challenge. Do people even play this web video on your new site? I mean, that's question number one. Do you have that kind of video audience? And then the second question is, how do you distribute it? If you distribute your video through things like Facebook, then it does make a lot of sense to integrate the advertisement into the content of the video so that it goes everywhere the video goes. It doesn't have to be a pre-roll ad. So that's really where it's most appropriate. I'd also say that I stayed away from advertorial and even product placement because when you asked me earlier if you thought it eroded trust, I actually think that it erodes trust more if you're doing product placement or heavily using advertorial without the right kind of look and feel and experience than being upfront about here's our partnership with so-and-so. So it's a long game though. I mean, I don't know, in 10 years that might be the norm that we're all so used to, that people are media literate and can easily distinguish between those things, and then it doesn't have to erode trust.
We'll go ahead and stop there. I think Ben can hang out for a little bit if you have questions, but let's thank him again for his time and insight.